I've already reported it to the police. But the truth is, that incident still hasn't been solved. And I feel like, someday, it's going to happen again. This happened back in 2021. I was living in Dallas, Texas at the time. In a small apartment building, on the 3rd floor. Working for an IT company, and life was perfectly normal. Every morning, office, evening, gym, night, Netflix and coffee. But there was one strange thing about that building. In the basement corner, there was a room whose lock never changed. And every night, faint vibrations and sounds came from it. At first, I thought it was just a laundry machine. But one night, after work, when I went downstairs, I saw the room's light blinking and heard footsteps inside. But the problem was, that room was officially marked closed storage. Management had forbidden anyone from using it. Next morning, I asked the building manager, "Hey, does anyone live in room 03B? He just smiled and said, "No one's been there for years." Then there was a brief, awkward silence. And he changed the subject. After that day, I could feel that same vibration every night. Like something heavy was moving behind the wall. Sometimes, faint knocking too. Tick, tick, tick. And whenever I got close, everything went quiet. One weekend, I went out late for groceries. And when I came back, a police car was parked at the building entrance. 2 officers standing downstairs. And a black garbage bag lying in front of them. I casually asked, "Everything okay, officer?" They just said, "Routine pickup, sir." But their eyes didn't have the usual calmness of a routine call. The next morning, I saw on the local news that another body had been found in a nearby alley. And police said the suspect was seen around the building. The same building I lived in. From that day on, every knock, every footstep, every sound from the elevator started to feel strange. At night, when I turned the lights off, it felt like someone was standing right outside my door. And the scariest thing was, my doormat always looked slightly moved, as if someone had placed something under it. One night, out of curiosity, I set up a camera, a cheap Amazon webcam, above the door, and went to sleep. In the morning, when I checked the recording, at 2:43 a.m., a shadow stopped in front of my door for a few seconds, then moved the doormat slightly and slid something underneath it. I watched that clip over and over. The face wasn't clear, just a dark hoodie and gloves. But one thing was noticeable. On his hand, there was a tattoo-like mark. 3 vertical lines. That day, I didn't waste any time and filed a police report. Officer Miller came. He watched the video, took notes, and said, "We'll check the street security cams." But 3 days later, when I followed up, he said, all footage from that night was corrupted. That's when I first realized, this wasn't some random stalker. It was something organized. For the next few nights, everything seemed normal. I thought maybe that person had left. But on the 8th night, I smelled something faint. Like metal, a mix of iron and burnt plastic. The source? That same basement room. I grabbed a flashlight and went downstairs. The door was slightly open. Inside was darkness, and under an old chair, there was some white powder. I zoomed in. It wasn't chalk. It looked chemical. Then the light flickered, and I heard a step behind me. I turned the flashlight. No one there. Just a faint voice, "You shouldn't be here." I froze. For a second it felt like someone was standing right behind me. But when I turned around, there was only darkness. I ran back to my apartment, locked the door, and tried to catch my breath. The next morning when I went downstairs, that room was locked again. as if nothing had ever happened. I told the building manager. He smiled and said, "Sir, the basement is sealed. Maybe you were half asleep." But there was something strange in his smile, like he already knew what was down there. After that day, I kept a hammer in my room every night and left a webcam recording. And every morning, I checked the file. But one thing was missing every single night: the last minute of the recording. And what happened in that missing clip, I still don't know to this day. I couldn't tell if it was a coincidence or someone hacking the system. I called my IT friend, Ethan. He started checking the laptop and said, "Bro, this is some kind of external interference. Like someone's inside the same Wi-Fi network." When he tried to trace the IP, an address popped up, 03B basement storage. My heart skipped a beat, because that was the same room where everything began. Ethan said, "Let's check it out tomorrow morning." But I said, "No, tonight." Because I felt by morning, someone would have cleaned up the evidence. Around 1:30 that night, Ethan and I went downstairs. The door was locked. But when we flashed the torch, the latch was already half broken, as if someone had closed it in a hurry. Inside, darkness. Just an old table, a rusted chair, and a monitor in the corner. On the monitor screen, black background and white text blinking. "Watching." Ethan immediately pulled the plug and said, "Bro, someone's been spying on this entire floor." I asked, "But why?" He said, "Let's get out before someone comes." When we came upstairs, the building hallway was eerily silent, like everything was listening. And that's when we heard a sound. The doorbell. My apartment's bell was ringing. I checked the camera. No one was outside the door, but there was a folded paper on the floor. I picked it up. It said, "Don't open what's beneath." I told Ethan. He said, "They're messing with your head. Let's just leave this building." But the next morning when I went to his place, his phone was switched off, and his roommate said he hadn't come home since last night. I thought he was joking. I filed a police report, and when they checked the CCTV, the last footage showed Ethan going into my building's basement. And after that, nothing. The police sealed the area and temporarily moved me to another floor. But I still couldn't calm down inside, because I felt that basement wasn't just a storage room. It was a cover for something else. The next night, I noticed the same vibration coming from behind my room's wall. The same one that used to come from the basement before. I tapped the wall. Tick, tick. And from the other side came a reply. Tick, tick, tick. My body froze. I grabbed my phone and started recording, and walked closer to the wall. Then the lights went out, and for a few seconds, everything went silent. Then a whisper came. "He's still down here." I turned the light back on, and saw a small crack at the bottom of the wall. I pried the corner open with a screwdriver. Cold air came out, and a smell like old plastic mixed with chemicals. I pointed the flashlight inside, and saw a narrow tunnel-like passage. It seemed to lead directly down to the basement. I decided to call the police. But when I dialed, there was interference on the line, and a mechanical voice said, "You shouldn't have seen that." That night, I left my apartment and went to a motel near Highway 67, an old roadside place where an elderly man sat at the reception. I said, "One night stay." He simply replied, "You're not the first one running from that building." I thought he was just making random talk. But when he asked for my name, and I wrote down my address, he paused for a second, and said, "03B basement, right?" I couldn't understand how he knew. I asked, "How do you know that?" He just said, "Son, that building's been marked since '95. It's not your fault." I said, "Marked? For what?" He lit a cigarette and said quietly, "Because 3 people went missing there, and their case was never closed." I went silent. And he added, "Under that basement, there's an old tunnel. It used to be an illegal lab, and no one's been in there since." I thought maybe it was all coincidence. But then he pulled an old newspaper clipping from his pocket. The headline read, "Unsolved Disappearances, 03B Building." And in the photo was that same building. That night, in the motel room, I opened my laptop and searched 03B Dallas basement missing persons. 2 articles came up, both had the same phrase. Case left unsolved due to data corruption. Data corruption, the same issue that happened with my webcam. Everything was a pattern. I decided that the next day, I'd go back and see for myself where that tunnel led. Because if Ethan went inside, then I had to bring him back. The next morning, when I reached the building, there was police tape everywhere. And a notice posted, "Property sealed under investigation, Dallas PD." I tried to look underneath the tape. Complete silence inside. But a faint light was blinking. In the same spot, the corner of the basement. I couldn't understand why the police hadn't sealed it properly. I took a deep breath and lifted the tape, stepping inside. As I went down the basement stairs, I felt someone walking behind me. I turned around, no one there. Just faint footprints on the stairs. Fresh ones. I turned on the flashlight, and something shiny was lying on the floor. Ethan's phone. The screen was cracked, but the phone was still on, and the last video was still playing. I hit play. Ethan was in front of the camera. Behind him, the same tunnel was visible. He said, "Bro, if you see this, don't come here. It's not what you think." Then the screen started shaking, and a dark shadow passed behind him. The video cut off abruptly. I couldn't believe what I'd just seen. I put the phone in my pocket and pointed the flashlight into the tunnel. A low metallic humming came from inside, and the air vibrated slightly. I took one step in, then another, and as soon as I took the third, the basement door slammed shut behind me. A loud thud, and the light went out. Only that same voice echoed, "You came back." The voice came from right behind me. I swung the flashlight around, but there was nothing. Just a cold gust of air. And the metallic humming grew louder. I pointed the flashlight at the wall and saw scratch marks on both sides of the tunnel, like someone had tried to write with their nails. I moved the torch closer, and it read, "We are still here." My hands started trembling. I pulled out my phone and dialed Ethan's number, but there was no signal, just distorted static. And within that static, for a brief second, I heard Ethan's voice. "Don't trust them." I focused the light ahead. There was an old metallic door deeper inside the tunnel. On it was written, "Research Facility, 1995. And below, a faded warning sign, "Biohazard, keep out." I realized the old man at the motel wasn't lying. This really was an illegal lab. And maybe it was still active. I pushed the door. It creaked open, releasing a chemical smell. Inside were old machines, glass jars, and scattered files. On a desk lay an old ID card. Dr. M. Reeves, Biochem Lead. Beneath the card, a paper-clipped note read, Project Rebirth terminated, subjects unstable. I opened the file pages. Inside were several images. X-rays of human subjects. And underneath them it said 03B residents. Only one word escaped my mouth. Oh my God, I understood it now. That building wasn't random. It was built over those same experiments. And maybe one of them was still alive. Then suddenly, a loud noise echoed. Something fell behind me. I turned the flashlight and saw a silhouette. Someone's shadow moving behind the glass. I got closer. It was a metal chamber. Someone was lying inside, face covered with wires and tubes. I leaned in closer, and my heart stopped. It was Ethan. I banged on the chamber glass. Ethan, wake up. But his eyes were closed. And on the machine's monitor, a line blinked. Subject reconnected. I couldn't understand what that meant. I started looking for a button on the chamber's control panel. But all the wires were cut. Then another screen blinked. Unauthorized access detected. That's when I knew someone was active in the system. Someone was watching me. I turned the flashlight toward the corner. A CCTV camera was blinking. And beneath it, a mic was attached. From that mic came the same voice. You shouldn't have come alone. I turned around. And a shadow stood at the tunnel door. Black suit, mask, and a syringe in his hand. I shouted, "Who are you?" He calmly said, "The same person you reported 3 years ago." A flash hit my mind. The same pattern. The same tattoo of 3 vertical lines. It was the same man who used to come outside my door. The one who slid something under my doormat. I stepped back. But he moved closer. And said, "They didn't die, they evolved. You helped us find them." I couldn't understand what he meant. I grabbed a metal pipe and struck his arm. He lost his grip for a second. I tried to break Ethan's chamber. The glass cracked and a sharp hissing sound came out. Chemical gas started leaking. I began choking. I tried pulling Ethan out. But he was too heavy. Then his eyes suddenly opened. And he said only one word. "Run." I ran to the end of the tunnel. The door was locked. I pushed with all my strength. Finally it opened. And I ran up the stairs. At the basement exit, I looked back. Only one light was blinking inside. And that same voice echoed again. "We'll finish what we started." I ran straight out to the street. It was 4:10 a.m. And there was an ambulance parked outside the building. Police vehicles too. Someone must have heard the alarm. I saw Officer Miller. He recognized me. And said, "You again?" I said, "There's a lab inside the basement, my friend's down there." He said, "That building's been empty for months. Nobody lives there." I pointed and said, "No, I just came out of there." But when I turned around, the building door was sealed. And every window was layered with dust. As if no one had entered for years. I was completely confused. I tried showing him the video from my phone. But Ethan's phone was dead. And all my recordings were corrupted. Only one image remained. The snapshot of that chamber. And on the screen it said "Subject reconnected." Miller closed his file and said, "Sir, maybe you need rest. There's nothing there." But as he walked away, he added, "Funny thing though, that building address doesn't even exist on our records anymore." After that night, I left Dallas and moved to Colorado. But every February, I get an anonymous email. The subject line reads, Still unsatisfied? And the attachment has only one photo. That same basement. And on Ethan's chamber it says, "Reconnected active." I've already reported it to the police. But the truth is, that incident still hasn't been solved. And I feel like someday it's going to happen again.